Hello and welcome to Real Hi-Fi Help. In this video I'll talk about the DAC trap, how to avoid it. So basically the other day I was speaking to my friend over the phone and we had a very interesting discussion because he had for some time tried a lot of different DACs on his amplifier. And he reached the conclusion that even though he tried a lot of expensive DACs, the built-in DAC almost always beat the other DACs. And this is kind of that story. So my friend, as you probably know, having watched some of my other videos, he has probably the best streamer in the world and one of the best sound setups in the world, only because it's running at almost 100% efficiency, where most other people's sound system is probably only running at around 10 to 20%. And as I explained in this other video, is because he's able to control the clock on his streamer. He has short power cables, he has a really good room, a lot of other stuff where he's really been nerding around, trying basically everything. So he's a bit of a perfectionist and has just reached, ridiculous levels of hi-fi, where even I just can't really, follow that kind of level of audio, good audio sound. So he wanted to try a new DAC, actually buy a DAC, because he was pretty sure that if he could just isolate that DAC away from that amplifier, so it wasn't internally in his Yamaha receiver, he could get some pretty good details from doing that. And this is kind of the story behind that. So he bought a DAC for about $500. And what he found out was the black levels were really good, depth really good, clarity really good, separation power really good. But here's the problem, and this is also what I've discovered testing almost all the DACs out there. It just sounds sometimes very unnatural and fake. It can at times seem as if it's very good, it's very integrated, it's very natural, but it's just consistency. They just don't really have that, these cheaper DACs. So it kind of dissects the sound. So you're missing this analog, wavy, down-to-earth, real sound, where things sound real, where instruments sound real, instead of hyped or overly separated or so he basically found out what I also had predicted, was that his own Yamaha receiver, even though it's a worse DAC than what he had outside, still performs better because the signal doesn't have to travel as much. You don't have to do a lot of converting. So it's more integrated, it's more balanced, it's more natural, it's more musical, his Yamaha built-in DAC. And that's even though that this DAC probably only costs like, I don't know, $100 in parts, putting that together. So just think about that. He's got a built-in Yamaha DAC, which only costs like around $100 in parts. But it's just so well integrated in his amplifier. It doesn't have to go through extra cables, through extra plugs. It doesn't have to be rerouted. It's just a lot of the same type of sound. They're not other parts from other manufacturers that are getting, put into this equation. So yeah, he's made it possible to basically beat a Meitner or a Macintosh DAC that in this country where I live, Macintosh DAC would probably go up to around $15,000. If you get like the MCD 1100, where it's like a CD DAC combination, it's better than that. And that's because it's integrated. So, this is kind of what to take away from the story, is that you want a good amplifier and you want a pretty decent DAC, not necessarily the best, but the fact that those two things are at a pretty decent or high level will save you a lot of money, because as soon as you have to involve cables into the equation and you're mixing other brands, even though it can on paper look like it can do a lot more, you lose a lot of that performance. Even with Audio Note, that make the best DACs in the world, if you have some kind of a other brand cable than Audio Note between the DAC and the amplifier, you can probably lose like 50% of that potential of the sound. You won't harvest it. It doesn't take much to destroy a sound, especially when you're dealing with good equipment. And that's kind of what to take away from this story. You just want everything's integrated somehow. It's very tempting to listen to a certain DAC that does a certain thing and think, wow, I want that separation, I want to hear that layering, that blackness, I want to hear that depth in the music, But trust me, when you have a cheap DAC and it's not the same brand that you're running in your system, it's not the same brand as your amplifier or what else you're running, most of the times it will fight the rest of the equipment that you have. So just to let you guys know, my friend achieved this, which is exceptional. But that's also because he's reached that level, basically the highest level that is possible with his system. Of course he could get an amplifier, a speaker, or something else. Yeah, some few other things. That could probably be a hell of a lot better. But then he would have to pay like 5 times more for an amplifier, 3 times more for a speaker. And he would like start all over, He had to discover, is that compatible with his streamer? Does he maybe have to change a part on his streamer in order to hit that similar sound? And it's just letting you guys know that this problem exists, and you can break the system by following the information that I've just provided here. Now, what's crucial, what you may not know, is that he has basically the best streamer in the world. You can't buy this streamer. It's not a finished product. It's a lot of different products from a lot of different brands put together in a normal PC, and he's just fine-tuned it. So when that signal hits that DAC doesn't have to strain. It doesn't have to like take all the load, and then the whole system depends on that DAC, how it sends the signal from the DAC to the amplifier. It doesn't work in that way. Most people's sound systems in the world rely on the DAC doing a huge part of treating the signal. And when you look at, if I were to write down like a top 10, bad idea, root cause of destroying sound, I would have to put streamer and probably DAC at pretty much, almost the highest level. I would say the streamer is like or the source piece of hardware, CD player, streamer, LP player, whatever you have. That is like the root problem with most systems in the world. When you go to shows and you think, wow, this really blows me away, just imagine how well it would sound if they would have complete control over the clock, like my friend has with his streamer. Just because you're buying a piece of high-end equipment doesn't necessarily mean that they're anywhere close to the maximum potential of what the source signal has to provide. The whole source signal is like sorry again, it's like the main problem that we have in this world, one of the main problems at least, where you are left to believe that just because you're buying something that's expensive and it sounded good and a lot better than the other cheaper stuff, that it's somewhere close to the potential, the maximum potential of source equipment out there. But I'm just here to tell you guys that no, it isn't. It's actually shockingly bad, the whole source equipment that we have on our systems in general. And some few people, they've managed to have a really good source and controlling the clock and pairing the cables, having a decent room and all of that. And I take my hat off to those people. They probably used a lot of time getting to that point. But I'm telling you guys, it's so difficult getting the source right. And what you have to realize is that when you have a half bad source or a bad source or something that you think is really good, that small amount of error, that gets put onto the DAC. And the DAC kind of gets like this huge strain. And when you combine that with a DAC having cheap parts in it, and you're putting that signal, that faulty signal, through that cheap DAC, and you then have to convert it with cables, and you like push it over to like a half good amplifier, where a lot of amplifiers, they lose kind of a lot of their magic by just getting the signal through the RCA ports, because they use cheap RCA plugs and cheap cables. And then often they have probably like chipset circuitry that is extended, and it just makes it worse. So just letting you guys know, this is like, consider this a preview into what the future looks like for your system, what you can expect of DACs to do generally, and integrated DACs. And yeah, and just kind of to let you guys know that this is a trap to fall into, because you can make things sound a lot better in certain ways. And he has now achieved, he's basically got what is better than I would say it's better than a $1.5 million Macintosh system, or Pass Labs, or Mark Levinson. And those sound pretty darn good. Sound pretty good. It's still far from the top, but he's only used like, what has he used? I think around $50,000 all in all with all the parts. Of course, he's also used like $50,000 on finding out on how to get to those $50,000 parts. So you also have to take that into consideration. But just what I'm saying is that it's tempting to be very proud, to feel like you got a lot for your money and then stick with that. Because even though you're beating the system, and you're able to achieve a DAC sound that probably sounds like a normal 10, 20, 30,000 dollar DAC, and only pay like $500 or a couple of thousand. I'm telling you guys, don't settle with that. Okay? Go with something that is fully natural, integrated, and sounds good with a lot of different genres of music. It's a hard journey finding DACs like that. And I've only been able to realize that, that Audio Notes really makes those types of DACs. I have once in a while, very seldomly, heard some really expensive DACs that almost sounded as good as those Audio Note DACs. And those were DACs like Negra DSD DACs. I don't know how much they cost, $20,000, $30,000, something like that. I heard, what was it? There were parts of the Playback Design DACs and the MLabs DACs, and some of these newer top model DACs where I just thought, sometimes I thought, wow, this is really good. But then you then you tried putting some awkward music on, like some Barbra Streisand or random, random classical music on, or some weird categories, genres of music, and then it started then you felt a bit like, yeah, I'm just listening to a PC box now. That's converting a signal. This doesn't sound like real parts that will keep me, in a trance for 10, 20, 30 years. This is starting to lose its effect. And we're talking about equipment that costs 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 for a DAC. I mean, obviously they are a lot better than the couple of $1,000 DAC, without a doubt. Okay, I'm not taking that away from them, but it's just it's such a big hole to throw a lot of money into, and it's just that it's so inconsistent. It really is. It kind of boggles your mind. And the way that this works is that if you're a pretty low-level user, let's say you have Macintosh, and you then take a Macintosh DAC, that is a lower-level sound, and that could actually, for some period of time, probably last longer, that sound, than most cheaper DACs on cheaper amplifiers, without a doubt. But it still doesn't get close to that really deep, layered, human-like detail. As soon as you get into this, what can I say, this really expensive zone of DACs, you're opening up, you're kind of pulling the cork out of the bottom of the sound. You're letting this thing in, the maximum detail. And with that, when you get maximum detail, you get a structural biased sound many times. And I've only heard Audio Note being consistent with their DAC sound. And I would have to say it starts at Audio Note 2.1 signature DACs. And for me nowadays, that isn't even enough to satisfy me. I mean, if I have to be fully satisfied and not think this DAC is not really up to the task, I would have to listen to like a standard audio note DAC for me to be fully satisfied. But that's also because I've listened to so many expensive DACs that it's like that's the minimum for me to keep my interest going. And obviously it can get a lot better with like the Audio Note DAC 5 and now the Fifth Element, which is like, you know, it's like the craziest DAC sound you could ever imagine. It's just crazy. I mean, that's obviously a lot better. And I have in my system an Audio Note DAC 4, but yeah, it's just tough. You know, you just can't buy cheap DACs. It just doesn't last. You know, you get tired of it. It's like walking into an ice cream store and then just picking a vanilla or chocolate ice cream flavor from a random brand. You know, it's like yeah, good, here and now. A month passes. You try a different brand with a different vanilla, different chocolate. And it's like, yeah, this is slightly different. Interesting. And that's how it is within the DAC world. They just don't do natural. They don't do integration. They don't do gluing everything together and making sense of it. You know, everything's just raw, separated data. That's what it really is. And you start to kind of figure that out once you own the equipment. So that's basically kind of what I'm informing you guys of. I'm not gonna read this, you know, up for you guys. You guys can kind of read this thing. It's just I'm just using this as inspiration. But yeah, it's just things get smarter. They get more layered. They get more detailed. The more money you pay. I mean, obviously. And of course, the black level, the depth, everything like that, it almost always gets better once you pay more money. There are still a lot of brands out there with a lot of models that really suck. And I'm not going to mention them out of respect, but they're really bad. Really, really bad. And those are typically the expensive equipment that most people hear, which kind of makes them think that a lot of the stuff that goes on in the industry is snake oil. So I kind of get that, you know. I understand that. It's a long journey finding the expensive equipment that actually is really, 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 really good. Really. And yeah, it just, it's a trap, you know. You can easily get a lot for your money and then be satisfied with that. It's a trap. And don't be satisfied with that. Have at least a standard that's Audio Note 2.1 signature. Let's say you find something that isn't Audio Note and that you find is equally good or better. Good for you. You made that work. Congratulations. But I haven't found it. I've tried the most insane combinations of DACs, CD players, on most amplifiers out there, most speakers. DACs are just generally pretty bad. And what's even worse are streamers. Streamers are like the root cause of most problems in most systems. It could also be a CD player, which is the source instead of a stream. Not everybody streams, but most people nowadays will be streaming. And I'm telling you guys, streamers are still relatively new. They are evolving pretty fast. They're getting a lot better year by year. But they still have a lot, you know, a lot has to happen before they get up to the level of the really expensive CD players and the really good vinyl setups. And I haven't heard a proper streamer so far. I've heard the name, I've heard the Blue Sound, I've heard Auralix, Arenda, all of these things. they sound quite horrible. I mean, does an Alrenda and an Alrelic sound a lot better like a blue sound, even though they're like 2 to 10 times more like 2 to 30 times more expensive? Yeah, of course they do. They do get a lot better the more that they cost, but it's very mechanical, the streamer sound. And if you combine that with the fact that most people are streaming online, they're using Tidal, Spotify, all of these streaming services, it's kind of destroying the whole musical experience, because these streaming services, they suck the naturality of the music out, and they just don't. You don't notice it until you've actually experienced good streamer sound, which almost no people have in this world. But I mean, it's just gray and mechanical, and it's just raw information. I remember listening to Bob Dylan's what's it called, Man in a Long Black Coat or something like that, at a friend's place. I listened to it for the first time at a friend's place on his like top Auralix or Aurenda, I can't remember, streamer. It sounded horrible, absolutely horrible. I listened to it at hi-fi shows, and I just thought, why is it playing music in this way? This is not music. This is just raw detail going pling-a-ling-a-ling, and then whoop, whoop, one channel, other channel, speaker. It just sounds wrong. But the problem is that the standard of streamer sound is so low, so bad. Most people won't notice this. It's only when you've actually listened to a good streamer that you realize that, oh yeah, it's supposed to sound like that. It's a human being on the other side of that microphone, you know. It's a guy with actual emotions who's here to convey a message. And it just doesn't sound like that. You know, most streamers nowadays, they just they're almost direct crap. That's what I think. I mean, they're getting slightly better, you know, like Nime, whatever they're called. I mean, they have gotten into a type of streamer sound that is more round and natural, but still, you can still hear it's a PC running the signal, and that's very unfortunate. So obviously that's a lot better than the first generation of Blue Sound boxes that we had, that a lot of people have nowadays because they're cheap, and they're like this upgrade solution to Sonos that most people use. Sonos is, by the way, basically the worst crap you could ever buy. Yeah, that's just kind of how it works. So a lot of people, they have all their attention on the speaker, on the amplifier, and then in the end they might do the DAC. But just realize that even though amplifier and speaker are basically the most important parts of the sound, I would suggest then after that fixing the source, because that means that the money that you use on your DAC will give you a lot more. It will just give you a lot more value for your money when you fix the source. So that's basically the whole message behind this. But yeah, if it's at all possible, try an AudioNote 2.1 signature DAC. That's like the basic good DAC sound that everybody kind of needs, but haven't really heard. And trust me, it gets a lot better than that, you know. Once you get into 3.1 and then you get better tubes for it, gets substantially better. And then when you get into like the DAC 4 of Audio Note, then it's like a whole new game of Audio Note DACs. It just, Audio Note DAC 4 obliterates every DAC on the market. And to make it worse, the Audio Note 5, I would say, is at least twice as good. Yeah. And the Audio Note 5th element, I would say at least twice as good as the Audio Note DAC 5. So, I mean, there you have it. You just don't, there's no competition in this field. Everybody's just going in their own, direction, putting their own spin on the DAC sound. But let's just get real, because this is real hi-fi help. DACs generally suck, and I know, getting a shit DAC is popular. Getting a Denafreps DAC, R2R DAC, is popular. 1, 2, 5, 10 years from now, Macintosh might make a true 32-bit DAC that actually can play 32-bit DAC because of the the physical limitations that there is in the sound. So even though manufacturers claim they can play 24 or 32-bit, in right now we're only getting, because of the physical limitations, 20 bits, around 20 bits out of it, because of the physical limitations. So if it says 24 or 32-bit, don't believe it. It only takes it up to 20 right now with the physical limitations. But there might, in 10 years' time, be a true 32 bits DAC that actually can sound like 32 bits. And maybe at that time, we would probably get close to the Audio Note 2.1 signature DAC that we have right now. Maybe at that time. I mean, that's almost a physical impossibility. We have to do some pretty serious engineering to make that work, but it might be possible one day to do that. And then at that time, I would probably maybe take that into consideration and try one of those DACs. But again, we probably have to wait like 3 years in order for that to be affordable, and it's just a lot of work, Just make that easy decision and just take an Audio Note DAC 2.1 signature. And then when you're probably, when you want to challenge that sound a bit more, just change the tubes on it. Pay like $100 or $200 for a proper tube in it, and then it's like, I don't know, 20% better, and sell it used. Get an Audio Note DAC 4, something that's a lot better, and then put some better tubes than that. And then you've basically got, something that beats everything in the world. Yeah, at least with streamers, nothing right now that exists on the market would I even come close to recommending. I mean, streamers are really horribly bad at the moment, but they do a lot of compensating so that people don't hear those errors. So in a way, that's kind of good. It's a bit like a B&W speaker, artificially a lot dampening angle on the cabinet. You have a lot of units; they're very big. It gives an illusion of ease, bass, pressure, depth, where it kind of, what can I say, kind of takes care of the sound, so you don't notice the problems too much. And yeah, that's kind of where most hi-fi equipment is going. They want to transition over to chips and make everything compensate in a very complex kind of way. And you kind of have to do it nowadays in order to make money. Because even though a lot of manufacturers are selling a lot of expensive equipment, they're just not selling a lot of units to really make a lot of money, and that's why everything is artificially expensive. So it's difficult, but if I didn't have a lot of money, what I would do is just buy a used audio note integrated MyShoe amplifier. What is that? Price wise, what is that? That's probably like $1,000 to $2,000 used, and then I would get like probably a used audio note DAC 2.1 signature, probably 5, maybe 10 years old, maybe for $1,000 or $2,000, and there you basically have like one of the best amplifiers, one of the best DACs. Then you just need a good streamer. What would you do then? What I would do is probably I would make that streamer from that other video that I made the other day. I would do that. That would probably cost like $3,000 to do that properly, so it's proper, and you never have to upgrade that for like 10 years until you have to change the computer parts, which will probably cost you like $500 changing the computer parts in 10 years. That's like an optimal solution. Then you have like the optimal budget sound. But if you went to another channel, this is what they would say. Oh, we have the new Hegel in, and it's very good. Let's compare it to a PC audio system and a Macintosh. And they're just like, facepalm. Triple facepalm. Just what? I mean, obviously this equipment, Hegel, PS Audio, Macintosh, Paslabs, Mark Levinson, it's pretty much all in the same category, just with different structure, different signatures. It's pretty much all around the same level. And yeah, it kind of, it can at times sound impressive, but consistency, value for your money, you're just not getting it there. I mean, obviously with Hegel, it's a different story with Hegel, because price-wise, you're getting a lot more value-wise. But Hegel is like the obvious choice that most people who can't afford, big brand names, they go for. And you kind of get this, But if you want to be smart and you can't afford audio note, you may live in some kind of weird country that don't really have audio note, then try stuff like Abyss Sound or YBA, go with some of the middle models to top models, that's better. Trust me, that is better. It's more lively, it's more natural, it's more fun. Yeah, it might not have that tiny bit of extra oomph and stamp of authority and heritage, but hey, you're saving a lot of money on the equipment and running the equipment. So yeah, those are kind of like my considerations, something to kind of think about there. So now the best solution that I've heard is audio note, CD player, and DAC integrated in one box as a source. No cables. Everything in one box, CD player and DAC. But at the highest level. I don't know what they call these boxes. If it's like DAC 4, 5, 6, whatever. You have to kind of figure that out for yourself. But when I heard this, then I just thought, wow. Finally, not listening to the cable make the signal inferior. That's kind of that was kind of an eye opener there, where I thought that DAC CD in a DAC, that's gonna create a lot of jitter, but no, actually the opposite. when you don't have that cable going from an external CD player to an external DAC, and then from the DAC over to the amplifier, you're actually getting deeper into the sound stage. You're getting a lot more detail, a lot more stable sound. You're removing a lot of jitter. And most people that even have audio notes, you might not even know this, but most people that have audio note, they don't even have proper cables on, And it's just heartbreaking to see, people with the best gear in the world still fail on this point. I remember watching a video on YouTube from EVGA CEO having this really like most expensive preamp and effect block from Audio Note, and then he had all kinds of weird stuff on it, like a Philips CD player that was like from the start of the CD times, from around 1990. I was like, what is this doing in the system? And they had like this Western electric speaker that only went down to 80 hertz, and I was like, what? And then he said, cables don't work on his system. I was like, what? You have the best preamp in the world, basically the best effect block after that preamp, and you just have this like shoddy source component and shoddy, actually kind of quite shoddy speaker. Does some things very impressively, but then people get these weird ideas. Then they just use like basic hardware store cable. And don't do that, just don't use basic hardware store cable, not on a top system. If it doesn't sound good using good cables on a top system, then there's obviously something wrong. Hint, Philips CD player from 1990s, hello, and the whole, I don't know, VPI, whatever it was, turntable he had, also looked pretty old and limited in sound. But yeah, that's kind of me ranting on there. But I also wanted to mention this thing that a lot of hi-fi channels are never going to mention. Generally in hi-fi, you want to avoid gear. I'm talking like CD players, amplifiers, speakers, cables. You generally want to avoid everything up to around $5,000. When you get into the $5,000 bracket point, and then to around $10,000 per unit, magic starts to happen, substance starts to happen. Generally, there are exceptions to the rule. This isn't always the case, but generally, I just find that, equipment below $5,000, I almost won't touch it anymore and test it, because I pretty much know from the start that this is just gonna suck balls like mad. But it's a good tip, There needs to be more hi-fi channels out there that state this, because everybody's politically correct about this topic, and they're like, oh yeah, you can get a hi-fi system for $500. Yeah, right. That's not gonna happen. Not unless you've got tinnitus. But yeah, another pretty good tip. And I'm guessing the Audio Note DAC is around $5,000. That's how I remember it. But there is a lot of gear, especially $500, $1,000-$3,000 gear, where it's just really has a scummy sound, where you're kind of like going like with your eyebrow, like what do I really think about this? It's kind of good, but I'm not really sure. And that's kind of like the mindset you're going to be in when you buy it. It's kind of okay. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, it does this thing. It's clear in this area here, but like what? are you gonna use money on something that just kind of is good? You know, $5,000 to $10,000. That's generally where you want to hit the price point of buying good stuff. I know as a fact, I think the JBL L100 classic speakers, those are really good value speakers. I think they're around $4,000 in America. Definitely not in certain parts of Europe, but in America. And that's one of the few exceptions where it's like, damn, you know, there it kind of hits you. You're getting a lot for your money. And another exception, like I said before in my previous videos, Fenderstein, 1CI and 2CE, those are also less than $5,000, substantially less, as far as I remember. Those are also like exceptions to the rule, but those are, again, you know, those are one of the few exceptions. Also, YBA A100 amplifier, I don't know how much that costs, $1,500 or something like that. I mean, that's like a normal $10,000 amplifier there, you know. These are things that we don't usually hear about. When we usually hear about equipment out there, it's like Denafreb's DAC, R2R, or Hegel, or PS Audio, or Macintosh, or all of this regular crap gear. Yeah, that's something to know, and that's something to kind of look out for. You could, of course, find something below $5,000 that's used, which will kind of solve that problem, you know. But I'm also stating stuff that's new, off the rack, from the stores. I can't really think of much other gear than that that's worth using your time on. No, can't really think about other stuff than that. I think the Utopia also costs like $5,000. The Focal Utopia, but they probably only cost like $4,000 because it's America. America gets things that are a lot cheaper than us people in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Denmark. And by the way, you know, if you think you're bad off being in America or the UK, think again, because Americans get the best hi-fi prices in the world, full stop. Of course, they also have a pretty low wage. You also have to take that into consideration, but compared to many other countries. But yeah, you just don't want to generally buy audio equipment if you live in Australia, New Zealand, Denmark, Canada, and definitely not if you live in Norway or Finland. Forget that. If you live in Norway or Finland, it's like game over. You know, you've lost. Don't buy stuff new from the store. You kind of want to buy used equipment. Remember this one guy who bought equipment from me, and he was like, maybe you could drive it over the border, so I don't have to pay the state tax. And I asked him, like, well, what's the state tax? Oh, it's around 60%. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? I was like, no. But then I said to him, but it's used equipment. And they're like, yeah. If they find that in my car when I go over the border, they will look at the receipt and they will add about 60%. And I was like, what? I don't know if this guy misunderstood the Norwegian rules, but that's just insane. So if you're in America and you like amplifiers, speakers, headphones, go nuts, you know, because you've got it easy compared to a lot of these other countries, you know. A lot of these other countries, they just collect on the customs, you know. I remember buy an expensive set of speakers, and I researched if I would have bought it new, how much just the shipping would cost, just to ship it before the customs got a hold of it. And it was what was it? 1,000. I think it was like $1,200 US dollars. I'm like, what? What? This isn't even a heavy speaker. These speakers only weighed like 50 kilos total, both together. But that's just the insane world of hi-fi, you know. So when you complain about your JPL, what's it called, L100 classic speakers, costing $4,000 in America, just realize that if you were in another country like, I don't know, Russia, some cheap country where you don't really you can't really buy hi-fi and everything is artificially expensive. I would say probably like Russia or Norway. You would probably have to pay more, like $7,000 or $8,000 there for that speaker, because you have to you're gonna produce it in America. You have to transport it, paying like $1,000 getting it over there. The guy who imports it, exports, or whatever you call it, he also has to get his share. The guy at the store, he also has to get his share of the deal. Before you know it, you're close to $7,000, $8,000 for a speaker you can get for like $4,000 in America. You know, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. And yeah, if I lived in the U.S., I would probably have a lot of headphones because headphones in the U.S. are pretty cheap. I wish I could get those prices that they have there, but I'll probably also have like an extra set of Fenderstein speakers, because Fenderstein speakers used over in the US are just ridiculously cheap. But yeah, that's just me ranting, and I hope you guys could use this information for something. You know, it's me being blunt, telling the stories that you don't usually hear from the other politically correct channels. So well, hope you guys enjoyed that, and try and like and subscribe. Have a nice day. Bye.